Hi, welcome to another edition of This Issue. My guest this time is Miriam Pemberton from Washington, D.C. Miriam, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much.
Good to have you here. Tell us about yourself and your work with the Institute for Policy Studies.
Yeah, so IPS is a multi-issue progressive think tank, the oldest multi-issue progressive think tank in Washington, been around since 1963. We work on peace, justice, and the environment, and I feel like I work on all of those things. I got into this line of work, this obsession with building a peace economy way back in the post-Cold War period, and I've been at it ever since, although times have been hard as the defense budget has soared, particularly after 9/11. It was really hard to do this work, but now here we are. We're in a kind of a defense downsizing. We are in a kind of a post-war period, at least the potential for one, and the first one since the end of the Cold War, 20 years ago. So this is our moment to seize, and I am trying to apply what I learned back in the post-Cold War period and adapt it to new times and to give it a new push, and to this time actually make it permanent.
Good, very good. You've come to Maine specifically to speak at a public forum in Bath about this growing movement across the nation to diversify our current dependence on military production. So tell us more about this movement. Where is it happening and what's going on across the country?
Mm-hmm. So I guess I don't know, maybe the catalyst for this movement was a law that was passed in Connecticut last year, creating something blandly called the Commission on Connecticut's Future. But it's broadly looking at reviving manufacturing in Connecticut, but very front and center in its mandate is to come up with a plan to diversify Connecticut's overly defense-dependent economy. Connecticut is, in fact, the most defense-dependent state in the nation.
Wow.
And
so that's significant then for them who have so much Pentagon investment, so to speak, for them to make that move, isn't it?
Absolutely, yeah. And so a week ago I spoke to the convention of the International Machinists Union in Groton, Connecticut, where Electric Boat makes its nuclear submarines and other things. And the union was absolutely critical to getting this bill passed. When people like you and I talk about the need for a commission to come up with a diversification plan, we are ignored. But when the unions got behind it, it passed. And their position is, we want to keep our jobs, obviously. They are good jobs, they are good paying jobs. However, our preference is to put our skills to work on things that the nation actually needs doing. So we'd rather, for example, in Connecticut, and in particular, the visionary leader of the machinists there in Connecticut, John Harrody, his main interest is in fuel cell technologies. They make those at Pratt Whitney and UTC and in other places, but they haven't made a big push to commercialize them. They're also thinking about wind turbines. There's any number of things that they're interested in doing. But while the defense contracts are flush, they're not going to.
What did you say when you spoke to this was like the statewide convention of the Machinists Union? What did you particularly say to them?
The kinds of things that I'm intending to say at this forum this evening, the critical role that they played in getting this commission through the legislature in Connecticut, the kinds of things that the commission might do, a sort of cautionary note about commissions in general. As we know, some of them have nice meetings, bring people in, talk, somebody writes a report. and then it's put on a shelf and that's it. So, there's some signs that might be happening in Connecticut. So my pitch was, you've really got to stay on top of this and push them to really come up with a plan for state involvement in helping the state adjust to defense cutbacks.
Why do you think it's so important for local communities, the places like Groton or places like Bath or places down in southern Maine and Kittery, where there are military manufacturing installations? Why is it so important for those local communities to be involved in this as well?
Yeah, communities that are defense dependent are very vulnerable. And we know that the budget is coming down. Sequestration, which we hate in all of its manifestations, except for the fact that it has brought the budget down. Not nearly as much as happened with the post-Cold War period, but we've got to take this and move it forward. So communities that are, whose economies are very entrenched in Pentagon contracts, what I say is you just got to walk and chew gum at the same time. You've got to do that work that currently sustains your community, and you've got to come up with a plan B. And a diversified economy, no matter what the community does, no matter what its economic base, having all your eggs in one basket is not a good thing. So diversifying, spreading that out, getting into different areas of work is simply, smart strategy, no matter what you do. But in particular, in a declining defense market, it's a survival strategy.
Besides Connecticut, are there any other states that are working on this as well?
Yeah, state of Wisconsin. They had a bill that was introduced, and this year they will spend their time, mobilizing support for this bill to create a similar commission. There are other states where activists are, working out strategies, basing it on what worked in Connecticut. My home state of Maryland, we tried this year in the legislature to get a commission set up. We really thought it was going to happen. There seemed to be no opposition. However, the largest employer in the state of Maryland is Lockheed Martin, the largest defense contractor on the planet, and behind closed doors they leaned on the legislators and they didn't pass it. But we're going to try again. People who work in this field know that one defeat does not mean that you give up and get off the field. So
I heard you say earlier that you had the support of the unions in Maryland, the Chamber of Commerce. Is that correct?
Yeah, a local Chamber of Commerce, not the national, but one of them, which was amazing. They actually testified on its behalf in the legislature.
Which other constituencies were supporting it?
There were, the usual suspects, peace groups and environmental organizations, and human needs organizations that know that, a state that is as defense dependent as Maryland is, not putting enough into human needs, into education and healthcare and the environment.
And environmental groups, what is their particular angle for supporting this kind of diversification legislation?
Yeah, there's several big pushes. One has to do with coal-fired power plants, another has to do with cleaning up the Chesapeake Bay. There's a whole range of environmental issues, and the issue is money. Where is it going to come from? And so changing the budget priorities is the way to get them the money they need to, work on climate change and cleaning up waterways and airways.
Yeah. Let's kind of go back in time to some of the history of this economic conversion / diversification movement. Many say that Columbia University in New York professor Seymour Melman was sort of the father of this movement. Tell us about him. Not many people know anything about him.
Right. So he was, as you say, a professor of industrial engineering at Columbia. And at the same time, he was the co-chair of Sane Freeze, what is now Peace Action. His research focused on the ways that this Cold War focus on military technology was deforming the industrial competence of the nation. So, for example, machine tools, to accommodate the extremely low tolerances that are required for high performance military technology. Machine tools began to focus on, finer and finer tolerances, and they kind of lost the capacity to be useful to manufacturing that is not based on high tolerances, but based on low tolerances, but based upon high volume production for the commercial sector. And so that he wrote extensively and deeply about this deformation of industrial competence in the civilian part of the economy. In the late 80s, he started an NGO. He called it the National Commission for Economic Conversion and Disarmament. I thought I was taking a temporary editing job with that organization. It sounded progressive. I didn't really know what economic conversion was, but I took the job a month before the fall of the Berlin Wall. So suddenly, swords into plowshares was going to allow us to move money out of the military and fund everything I cared about. And
the peace dividend.
The peace dividend. And so I got hooked on this area and never have looked back.
Yeah. At that same time, I was living in Florida, coordinating the Florida Coalition for Peace and Justice, and we organized a statewide conversion conference during that same period. And in fact, the then president of the Machinists Union, George Corpius, who had taken the place of William Wimpesinger,
Yep.
who was the great leader of the Machinists Union and a part of the peace movement, right, promoting conversion and everything else. But anyway, George Corpius came and spoke at our conference, and we were organizing around that as well. But then suddenly the conversion movement just disappeared. What happened?
So, in my view, what didn't happen? So, what did happen was the defense budget was cut by about a third, but too much of that money went into deficit reduction and tax cuts, kind of like what's happening now. And what you really need to get conversion a toehold, a stronghold, is a strong alternative investment agenda. And we said back then, we have an idea for a new national mission to take the place of winning the Cold War. It should be creating an environmentally sustainable economy. It has to be a big project, sort of retooling the United States for clean energy and clean transportation is the kind of big project that could absorb all those resources, that could give these contractors somewhere else to go and something else to do. Some of that was done, but not nearly enough to sort of build a permanent foundation for a peace economy. And so, the contractors began mobilizing, making more political contributions to their legislators, who began talking about it's a dangerous world, we don't know what's out there, so we have to mobilize, we have to have several layers of superiority above everybody else in the world, and then of course 9/11, and so defense spending went through the roof, and the idea of building a peace economy dwindled.
Seymour Melman, in one of his books, told a story about New York City. They put out a request for proposals to build mass transit rail cars, and they got no bids from the United States. You know about that?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. No bids from the United States because, and so they wind up, buying rail cars from Japan and Germany and Sweden and all of these countries because the U.S., had been pulled into manufacturing for the military sector and lost the competence to build rail cars
So
for the
we've
United
become a
States.
one-horse town then.
Exactly.
Well, so really it is all about jobs, but with corporations moving jobs overseas by the millions so they can get cheaper labor in offshore, the question becomes, what's the most cost-effective way to create jobs in this country? All the politicians say they want to create jobs, but we get little discussion, public discussion about what's the most effective way to do it. Now, the University of Massachusetts at Amherst Economics Department has done a study on this very thing, right? Tell us about that.
We actually commissioned that study. It was a follow-on to work that Seymour Melman and others had done in the previous decade. So we asked them to look at the question, if you put $1 billion of federal spending into the military, how many jobs do you create? The answer, it varies a little bit, but the proportions don't change. The first time the study was done, the answer was you put $1 billion into the military, it creates about 11,000 jobs, which is a lot of jobs. However, if you put it into transportation, generates 17,000 jobs.
17,000?
17,000. If you put it into education, about 24,000 jobs, roughly similar for healthcare. So, putting it into the military is really a poor bang for the buck in terms of job creation. Even cutting taxes does better than the military. So the response was, that's because these are the best paying jobs around. And it is true that they are good paying jobs, but there's a lot of other reasons for that disparity. It's more, military production is more capital intensive than other forms of job creation.
What does that really mean?
Just more money that you have to put into, build all the technology that you need to
and so you get
build the weapons.
You get less jobs because of that.
Right. Also, leakage overseas. More of the money goes to, sustaining bases and propping up weapons sales to other countries, and any number of reasons why there is such a poor bang for the buck from investing in the military.
Now, as communities look at this diversification program, apparently the government is creating planning grants to help affected communities. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah. So this program has been around for a long time, since the 70s, in fact, and it's actually in the Pentagon. It's called the Office of Economic Adjustment, and its sole purpose is to help communities adjust to either base closures or to defense industry contract cancellations. And since Congress is not allowing any more base closures to happen anytime soon, they just voted, we can't even study the question, we can't even think about it at all. So this office has been designated by the Obama administration as kind of the lead agency for adjustments for communities that are facing contract cancellations, or just communities that feel that given the general defense drawdown, a more diversified economy would be better. So these are planning grants for, towns, cities, any public jurisdiction. And the idea is you put together a broad-based coalition involving all the stakeholders in the economic health of the community, and you use the money to come up with a plan for how to diversify your economy.
I'm talking to Miriam Pemberton from the Institute for Policy Studies about the growing movement across the country to diversify communities that are overly reliant on military production. Miriam, why are elected officials in so many communities reluctant to talk publicly about our growing dependence on military spending? It seems that in many cases, the country has become addicted to military spending, and that there's little else going on. And so politicians from both parties are literally on their bended knees begging for the only investment dollars coming from the federal government, which appear to be military spending.
Yeah, and I'd add to that, the contractors have gotten even smarter than they were in the Cold War period, spreading contracts into, first of all, the key congressional districts represented by members who are the chairs of key congressional committees with jurisdiction over defense spending. So they are being very strategic in the way that they are spreading around these political contributions. I call it a political protection racket that they've got going. So that's part of the answer. Then, if all we have is a Pentagon industrial policy, and we have no other industrial policy to, as you say, create the investments for alternative production, then you are kind of held hostage to the economic base that there is, which is far too much, enmeshed in the Pentagon.
And that means basically, in a way, that we have to have continual war in order to create the demand for the product, isn't it?
That's right. Yeah.
And what does that say about our country morally, about the very soul of our nation when we have that kind of dependence?
Yeah. I mean, talking to these workers in Groton, they are conflicted. They don't want to lose their jobs. They need that paycheck, and yet they would prefer to know that what they were making is actually going to be useful. And yeah,
that's what we hear too at places like Bath Iron Works. There's a worker there that a couple of years ago created a petition saying we want to build wind turbines, and he spread it around the yard, and he got more than 800 signatures of other workers. So we know this for a fact, that there are many workers here in Maine that feel the same conflicted nature. That they need the job, they appreciate the job, they understand that it comes from the taxpayers ultimately, but at the same time they'd rather do something else. So in a way,
even Bath itself, back in the post-Cold War period, was very eager to get into other markets. At that point, it looked like commercial shipbuilding. Now, Bath Iron Works is involved in the deep sea wind consortium. It's involved in
Except the governor basically killed it.
Oh, good to know. Good to know.
Yeah.
All right.
So that was a setback.
How about Aqua Ventus? These floating turbines. There's this pilot project I read about. I don't know if that one's been killed or not. But, Bath Iron Works would like to get into this line of work, but they see it as, a niche area of work, which it will be unless it is funded. Bath would like to be doing that, and would if there were the money to do it. But at the moment, most of their money is still coming from the Pentagon.
But the way I think of it now is that the workers, privately or quietly are saying we'd like to do something else, but they need the support of the greater community.
Absolutely.
And so that's where the public really comes in here, that the public, I think, has a responsibility, not only to help create more jobs, but to create better jobs that helping to deal with our climate crisis, but also to help alleviate some of that moral trepidation that so many workers have that are just building weapons for endless war. So really, for me, one of the largest struggles right now, it's not so much to get the unions on board, it's to get the public on board, to get the public to really see this. Would you comment on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's why this movement to create a state commission is important, and the movement to get these planning grants to begin planning, because those vehicles are all driven by, elected representatives of the people, but they've got to involve, a broad spectrum of constituencies that are impacted by these decisions. And I hear you've got an election coming up, and it is going to be based upon, as all across the country, the issue is going to be the role of government. Can government, working with its people, help the community adjust to new historic conditions? Or is everybody, on their own to muddle through the best that they can? And so I think this new movement to create these commissions and to do transition planning that's broad-based, that involves all stakeholders, is a really important way of bringing in the broad base of the public and getting to work on securing this potential for historic change.
In our final moment or so, tell us a bit more about what other groups in other states are doing to bring the public in. What kind of strategies are they, organizing strategies, education strategies are they using to get the public involved in this discussion?
Mm-hmm. I'll make a pitch for one. A friend of mine is the field director for the Peace Action Organization, and she is going around the country doing what she's calling move the money trainings. And so looking at the budget, looking at the importance of this shift of federal priorities, strategizing with the groups about how to get this done. Certainly building a peace economy is part of that, and she's looking for new places to take this, and I would love to see Maine as a potential new target for her, and I can put you guys together.
All right. Well, Miriam, thank you very much for coming on the show.
Thank you.
And good luck in your very important work, and we're glad to have you here with us in Maine.
Thanks so much.
And thank you for watching another edition of This Issue. Until next time, good luck to you all, and please get organized.